Boker Tov, on this fine Sunday morning, right before Pesach, last Sunday before Passover. Passover, as you know, this year is on Sunday or Saturday night, Matzoi Shabbat. So we will, as the title of the class is, we will definitely talk about Passover. But let's, as we usually do, begin. Let me take over here my tzedakah pushka, my kupat tzedakah, put in a couple of coins into the pushka as a way of asking the Almighty to bless that today's Torah should be an inspiration, the right word should come forth and should be an inspiration both for myself and the listeners, or the listeners and myself. Okay, so we also always begin with a bracha. So if you have your own coffee, make a bracha yourself, or you could answer amen on my bracha. Let's go ahead and say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah bidvaro. Okay. So I started class a little bit late, and the reason for that is, as many of you know, that my dear mom passed away last Shabbat. On Shabbat it was, and as I was about to give class, I actually had, even though we finished Shiva yesterday, Shabbat was the last day, and you don't really get up formally on Shabbat, because on Shabbat you don't show any outward signs of mourning, but nevertheless the Shiva did finish on Shabbat morning. But I'm still getting messages and calls of people who are being supportive and comforting and so on. So hence I got a call right before I was about to give class. So we started a little bit later today. I usually try to start no later than 11 o'clock. Also, I want to sort of apologize. The last 2 weeks, I didn't have class on Sundays. And these Sunday classes that I could sit and schmooze with my friends over here, it's very precious to me. I try my utmost not to miss. But last week was the day of my mother's funeral. And the week before, I believe I was traveling on Sunday. I traveled, I think, to maybe even visit my mother in the hospital. I tried visiting her. She was in New York, and I tried visiting her every other week. So I think I was traveling Sunday, and even when I travel, I try to find a few moments to give class, but it didn't happen. So that's the story. And so let me begin a little bit, sort of honoring my mother. Yeah, what do you say about your mom? There's a Talmud that discusses the law that when we praise God, we only say sort of what Moshe Rabbeinu said, so that we don't limit our praise of God. So we say Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vanora, which is certain phrases that Moshe Rabbeinu used, and that's the phrases we use when we praise the Almighty. Now here we're talking about a human being, my mom, but there's only there's so much when you talk about a person's life that I don't want to sort of limit the impact that she's had on me, of course, and my siblings, and I will only go on. I will say that my mother was born in 1938, and as you all know, that 1938 was a very tumultuous time for our people. Right before the war, World War II, already at that point there was plenty of anti-Semitic both laws that were implemented in certain parts of Europe, especially in Germany and so on. And but my grandfather of blessed memory had the foresight and the, I guess, help from above, from the Almighty, to leave Europe in 1939. He left, not Europe, but he left Hungary. My mother was born in Hungary, in Budapest, and or Budapest, if you want to pronounce it correctly. He left. He had the insight again and the inspiration from above to leave, although many did not, and they perished, and they still have because they stayed behind. And just even that one decision and help made the difference for her to get out, eventually settling in Israel until she got married. She remembers the War of Independence. And they had their struggles. My mom had a life of struggles, both internally and externally. But she forged ahead. It was incredible. She had the resilience, and she had sort of the fortitude. She had the commitment. My dad, my biological father, himself a Holocaust survivor. For those who've heard my classes, I've heard me share stuff about my dad. Passed away at a very young age. My mother then was left with 3 orphans. She worked hard. She worked in a company. She worked in one of those factories then, sewing all day so that she could support us, send us to school, a private school, that is yeshiva, go ahead and put food on the table. She went through, her life was not all, perfect and rosy, and nobody's life is. I mean, that's part of life. It's part of life that you have ups and downs. And she had challenges. She had real challenges in more ways than one, without getting into details here. But through it all, she was resilient. She forged ahead. She did what needed to be done. And as a result of that, I say, on the one hand, my father passed away at a very young age. My mother remarried, and I was raised by my stepfather. So while I don't wish this on anyone, and it's sad on the one hand, or painful, on the other hand, I had the merit, the zchut, of having 2 very special dads. I had my biological father, who was a very special individual, based on what I'm told. And I also had my stepfather, who had his set of challenges also growing up in the Soviet Union. He was in prison, caught being a Jewish child, and he was put in prison. And eventually, after all that suffering and hunger and being in prison during the World War II and the Soviet era and so on, he made it out. And I was raised by 2 very, very special people, and each gave to that flavor of who my siblings and I are, an appreciation for different worlds, whether it's the Chabad world, whether it's some of the other Hasidic worlds, Jews in general, different customs. I mean, that all came about from the various different cultures that I was raised. So I had that merit. I definitely consider it a merit. Again, of course, you don't want it. You don't want that sadness and pain, but looking back on life, life, I remember the Rebbe once spoke. I heard a Fabrengen from the Rebbe, I was there, that every person's life is a Megillah. The Megillah took 9 years from the end and the beginning of the Megillah that we read on Purim. And it's presented as a very beautiful story, and all the dots are connected. But if while you're living through that period, you don't necessarily see the connection. And sometimes it only looks like setbacks, and you ask why and how come and so on. It's only later that all of a sudden you write it up in a Megillah and you see it's all the dots connected, and it's the hand of God, and it's all leads to amazing things. So every person's life is a Megillah. There's what seems to be random occurrences and sad occurrences and unfortunate occurrences and so on, and we don't ask for it. But we believe, and sometimes we merit even to see, how it's all part of your personal Megillah. And with the proper attitude, and hopefully at the end, you're able to rejoice, no different than the way we rejoice on Purim. And in this case as well, my mother and between my mother, my father, and my stepfather, they have, and I'm just taking a very, very rough, quick guesstimate. So I'm giving those, qualifiers, since I haven't sat down and put the numbers on paper, and I don't want to, because, you don't want to have any Ein Haras and so on. We Jews are sometimes superstitious. So, I think they have close to or in the vicinity of 300 grandchildren or great-grandchildren. And again, that's just a sort of guesstimate. But whether it's 250 or 300, I mean, it's incredible. These 2 individual or 3 individual human beings, based on much of the history of when they grew up, many of their sort of contemporaries in that period of time did not make it. And here, because of both tremendous guidance from HaKadosh Baruch, from God Almighty, and their own perseverance, as Viktor Frankl in his famous book says, I forgot the title of the book, but the meaning of the book is that people who had meaning in their life went ahead and was able to survive and move forward. I mean, these people had had incredible resilience, incredible commitment, real commitment to their families, to themselves, to their heritage, to bringing up the next generation. I don't think we appreciate it enough, and use it as an inspiration in our life when we have maybe questions and setbacks and so on. So this is all as part of sort of honoring my mother. I mean, more specifically, just to mention maybe one or two things, because the best way to honor a person is to continue their legacy, to do mitzvahs in their honor. And whoever's listening to the class, take on any mitzvah, any good deed in memory of my mother. Her name is Chava Bas Rab Shlomo Zev and Devora. That would be tremendously appreciated, and the best gift that you give me and give, of course, to my mom. But just to share one or two memories. I know my mother excelled in what is called Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. She would spend every single week going to, visit the sick in hospitals or in facilities which dealt with the handicap, those with inabilities, with disabilities. So I do remember, even as a young child, that there was a place not far from Crown Heights. I think it was part of the Kingsbrook medical campus, where there was a facility there for people with disability. And she would walk there on Shabbat and even on Sunday. And she would not only visit in itself is a beautiful commitment, but she would actually feed. She would go ahead and physically sit and feed these people who couldn't feed themselves. And it left an impression on me, left an impact on me. So that was one specific area that my mother excelled and was selflessly dedicated to. So I'm sharing that with you in honor of my mother. You have any other questions, you're welcome to send the questions. And I also want to take this opportunity for the hundreds and hundreds, or maybe even more, maybe thousands of messages that I received of comfort, of support. So thank you very, very much. I know many I've answered, some I haven't had the opportunity to answer yet, or so I want to take this opportunity to, on behalf of my siblings and myself, to share the deep appreciation. It's the hugs, etc., that really, really count. I even had, I'm not going to say a name, but it was very special. I even had a child that has some form of autism. Am I pronouncing it correctly? And it meant so much to me, because the teenager came over to me. And, when the children who have that sort of limitation, there's purity and a sincerity when they come over to you. And they handed me a picture. They handed me a little note which said the words of comfort, and then a picture of myself drawn by this person, saying, sorry for what happened to you. And it meant so much, just by one example, amongst the many messages of support and hugs and so on and so forth. So I'm sharing the appreciation, and may we only know of simchas. We only know happy occasions. It's the month of Nisan, the month of miracles, the month of redemption. It is part of the 13 principles of Jewish faith that we believe in the ultimate coming of Mashiach, as promised us by the prophets, where we will be all reunited with our loved ones. May it happen speedily, so that all of you listening, we all have loved ones who have gone to the Garden of Eden, who've gone to Gan Eden, but with the coming of Mashiach, we will all be united together and celebrate Passover together with all our loved ones. So that's somewhat sharing a little bit about my mother and giving her the honor that she is due. I just, to mention also, these are thoughts sort of coming to my mind as I speak, to mention, I have 3 sisters and I'm an only son. So as a result of that, there was a certain sort of additional bond that my mother, or a reliance, I would say, or a dependency to some extent that my mother had with me, and as a result, it was of course more painful when she was gone. And I just feel that that I need to honor her in a special way. Not of course not to exclude my siblings; they each had their own special relationship with her. But yet, every child likes to feel special. It's just part of our human nature. So, as an only son, there was always that space and that perhaps being spoiled and so on. But I hope I grew out of that being spoiled as I'm already, even though just on a sort of comical level, which probably you could all relate to, having fathers and mothers. I was already not only a grown child, but a father of many children. But when I would come to New York, I could have been 40 or 50 if I was staying by my mother and I was out maybe late, whether it was a wedding or sitting with friends. My mother would still call me. My mother was a little bit of the Yiddish mama worry type, and she would still call me "Wen kommst du heim?" in Yiddish. When are you coming home? You should come. I'm worried about you. And I was at that time maybe 40 or 50 years old, but I was still her child. I was still her, her son, and she was still, of course, my mother. And I know every one of us could relate to that, to our own mama, to our own Yiddish mama. So may her memory be blessed, and may we continue to learn from her good deeds and be able to celebrate this coming Pesach in complete and total redemption. Okay, I want to share a few things about Passover itself. I've shared these things in the past, but this is at that time of the year. So just to give a little bit of sort of Passover 101, both in the negative and the positive. Negative meaning negative things that we don't do or we have to stay away from, and positive things that we do, and highlight some of the most important obligations and biblical obligations of Pesach so that we celebrate Passover first and foremost in the proper Jewish sort of legal way, and also some of the basic sort of inner meanings of Pesach. So we know, and by now you must have heard that Pesach, of course, first and foremost, we shouldn't forget the basics before we go beyond the basics. So first, it represents the birth of who we are as a people. The Exodus of Egypt was not just so that we got out of bondage and suffering, but that is when God says to come and take lakachas, to take a nation from within a nation, to take us from within Egypt, and we were established as a people, as a nation, and later received the Torah, which is the guide for life, and a meaningful life, and a purposeful life, which until today inspires us and guides us, all of mankind. So that's what Pesach is on the most basic and most important level. And as a result, like everything in Judaism, God, in order for it to be meaningful and impactful and that we focus on it, there's always mitzvahs. And not only that, because the mitzvahs, the commandments associated with the holiday also bring forth that spiritual holy energy, which shines and it sort of exists in order for us to internalize on that day. So Pesach, there's basically 3 biblical mitzvahs that we perform on Pesach that I'm aware of, that comes to mind. And if I'm missing something, by all means, tell me. There's many customs, there's many even family traditions, but the 3 biblical mitzvahs is one is that you should not have and not possess any chametz, any leavened bread or yeast. That's somewhat on the negative side, and chametz is unique about that. Some people don't realize this and don't know this. They will not eat pig, which is a good thing, but chametz, maybe they'll grab a sandwich. It actually, the prohibition of not having chametz, not having leavened bread, not having yeast, is more severe than actually even eating pig, because pig, the Torah says you cannot eat. But when it comes to chametz, you cannot eat, you cannot have it in your possession, and you cannot even have any benefit from it. And as a result of that, there's many things that we do. Without having the time now to get into all the specifics, you can look it up, go to Chabad.org or CoralSpringsChabad.org and many other sites where you could go ahead and learn many of the basics of Pesach. But this concept behind it is no chametz, no leavened bread. And part of the deeper meaning is leavened bread means dough that rises. Rises represents ego, represents arrogance and so on. And an arrogant person is essentially enslaved within themselves. True liberation also means internal liberation. And when you're humble, you are truly liberated. You could listen to others. You could tolerate others. You could properly help others. It's not just about being a sort of narcissistic. You could also submit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God Almighty. So humility and faith, humility and and celebration of freedom really go hand in hand. And on the other hand, matzah represents humility. So by eating matzah, which is the biblical positive mitzvah of the night, you're actually ingesting humility, you're ingesting faith, because that's how matzah came about. Matzah came about because we believed in the Almighty when He told us, I'm going to the desert where a human being can't survive, and I'll take care of you. So by eating matzah, we're actually ingesting within ourselves faith, spiritual faith, not only the vitamins and not only the whatever the protein, I don't think it has any protein, but whatever we're ingesting. When we eat matzah, we're actually also ingesting, says the Zohar, that we're ingesting faith. So the positive mitzvah matzah. But I want to highlight this is important. I explain this every single year. In order to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, there are certain rules. Because Torah and mitzvahs have certain clear rules that God gave us, and without that, it's not effective. It's like taking an email address or a link and leaving out one dot, leaving out one letter. You don't get there, whether you understand it or not. You're just not going to get to the destination. So here too, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, there's a certain measurement, which is a kazayas. Kazayas is approximately, if you're taking the shmura matzah, it's probably just under a half a matzah, depending on how thick the matzah is. If you're taking the square matzah, I would say probably it's probably a full matzah. You have to eat a kazayas after dark, and without any diluting it with any drinks, because then you don't have the matzah, the purity of the matzah, no interruptions, no talking, and so on. All these things have to be done after dark. Now, after dark now, with how the change of the clock has changed, so it's kind of dark and it's late. So even if you're going to have your brisket at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, for whatever reason, and even if you're going to have your gefilte fish or your sushi or whatever it might be, make sure that you have a piece, a kazayit matzah. Kazayas is a certain measurement. Make sure you have a kazayit matzah without any interruptions, without any diluting it with anything else. Make sure to have it after dark for you, for your kinderlach. So even if it's after you've had most of your meal, even though that's not the ideal. The ideal thing is to start the Seder after dark, because the 4 cups, each one, including the Kiddush, which is one of the 4 cups, which is how it stands out from Kiddush throughout the year, also should be done after dark. But if for whatever reason I cannot convince you to do that, at least make sure that the matzah for the entire family should be done as described before. So that is the second mitzvah, biblical mitzvah of the night. And the third biblical mitzvah is to elaborate and to discuss the story and to re-experience through that discussion, both with yourself and your family, the story of the Exodus. Some people sit down by the dinner, Pesach night. I've met many, many Jews over the years. Yeah, Passover night, we sat down, we had brisket, we spoke about the sports game. Maybe my grandfather read the Haggadah and we were whatever. No, it's a biblical command. It's a biblical, in the Torah, l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, to tell the story in detail, to have your child ask, and for you to respond, and to elaborate, and to experience what they felt and the going out, and then internalize it to yourself. That's part of the biblical mitzvah of the night. So I wanted to share those sort of basic things of Passover. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more. You should go to the websites and learn and try to make it enjoyable. Try to make it not something that's a drag on the family. In fact, you're going out of Egypt. Make it something that's wonderful and beautiful and a beautiful experience and meaningful today. There are countless, there are so many Haggadot in Hebrew and English and all languages that share different insights. Perhaps pick 2, 3 insights that resonates with you and that you know your kids will enjoy. Remember, Passover night is the only night where, to the best of my knowledge, where the Torah says and instructs us to speak to 4 different sons, which really represents all our kinderlach. In other words, it says in the Torah, put on tefillin. It says in the Torah, keep Shabbat. It doesn't say, oh, well, this is what you should tell this child about Shabbat. This is what you should tell that child about Shabbat, or tefillin, or whatever other mitzvah, kosher. Here, Passover night, we talk about the 4 sons. Why? Telling us that since we're talking about the birth of our people, what is the best assurance for the continuity of our people is educating our kindlach, our dear children. And that's our primary responsibility, to give them a Jewish education. So here the Torah tells us 4 sons, meaning it's your obligation as a parent to find a way to communicate, to excite, to inspire, to engage every child in their way. This is all part of the beautiful, beautiful Passover experience. I want to end off, by the way, with an incredible story, which is somewhat indirectly connected with my mother and her passing. It's not directly, but indirectly. But I also got sort of confirmation of this story, talking about someone who is sort of selfless, getting out of their own sort of little world and box. It's an incredible story. I first heard this story actually 9 years ago at my stepfather's shiva. I heard a little bit more detailed now at my mom's. And not only that, I sort of confirmed it firsthand with several parties that are part of this story. So, and with that, I will conclude. Again, sort of honoring my mother, connected with Passover. Passover, we begin the Seder and we say, whoever's hungry, come and join us. So it's a night. It's a night of unity. It's a night of selflessness. It's a night of going out of just yourself, part of the Exodus spiritual experience. So I want to share this following story. Incredible story. It's like to me, it was amazing. So during the Shiva this time, again, there was a couple of details to the story, and I'll explain what it was that was new, that gave it a little extra, an extra chavivut, an extra endearment to me. So after my father passed away, and even before, because my father, sadly, even though, he suffered enough in Auschwitz, but then only God knows why, he also was sick with cancer. And that's what he passed away from. So he was out of the picture, so to speak, for about 1.5 years before he passed away. And we lived in Borough Park at the time. If you know Brooklyn and Borough Park, you could give me a thumbs up over here. And as a result of that, we had neighbors and a landlord that were exceptionally kind to us. They were also Holocaust survivors. They lived on the same block, in Brooklyn. If you live on the same block, you live in the same block. Here, it's also that way, but not to the same extent. Something you could live in the same block, and it's a whole dreidel to get to but we lived in the same block, and we had incredible neighbors. And there was a Jew who was our landlord, is the way we called them in Brooklyn. He owned the home that we rented from. His name was Lemu Schwartz. He actually was what we might call somewhat of a mechutin, meaning he was the brother of my uncle. My uncle through marriage. My mother has a twin sister. May she live long and be well. Her husband's brother was the one who owned the home that we lived in Borough Park. His name was Mr. Schwartz. Call him Mr. Schwartz. Lemu Schwartz was his name. And he has a special place in my heart because he had a son. He has a son, should be well, who was my age, and we were very good friends. And he also, he would look after us. The landlord, Mr. Schwartz, was very kind to both me and my sisters. He would take me to shul. So there's a place in my heart till today, of course. And I've mentioned him in class a couple of times. But this is the fascinating story that I heard, which is there was an individual that worked for a company, a fellow what we call a fellow landsman, a fellow member of the community, of the religious Jewish community in Borough Park. And unfortunately and sadly, this fellow had a stroke. And because of his stroke, he became somewhat, again, disabled on some level, and he wasn't able to perform at work to the capacity which he did before he had the stroke. And the boss, the owner of the factory, gave him a salary for a month or two, and then I cannot carry him. He's not producing, and I can't afford to have him on my payroll. And this Mr. Schwartz heard about it, and he went over to the owner, to the employer, and he said to the employer, look, I do not want you to tell so-and-so, your employee, that this is coming from me, because I want him to I want to maintain his dignity. I don't want him to know that I'm having this conversation with you, but I will sponsor his salary. You keep on paying him, give him the respect, give him whatever work you think he could do so he feels good about himself, he feels that he's supporting his family. I will carry that burden. I will pay you. You tell me what his salary was till now, and I will give you that salary. Incredible. But listen to this. The story doesn't end there. He did this for 2 years. After 2 years, the boss, the employer, came over to Mr. Schwartz and said to him, you know what, I was thinking about what you're doing. It's such incredible kindness. You don't have to do it anymore. I'll carry this person's salary as long as necessary. You don't have to do it anymore. And listen to what Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Lemuel Schwartz, said to the boss. He says, no, too late. It's my mitzvah. I'm doing this for the last 2 years. You had your opportunity 2 years ago. I insist and I refuse for you to do it. I am continuing to do it. Incredible. Now, what I found out now when I was sitting Shiva for my mother, I found out who was the employee. He was another neighbor on my block. I know who it is. Out of respect for him, I don't want to say his name. And during the Shiva, both the daughter of Mr. Schwartz and the daughter of this fellow, the employee, the one that the father, went through the stroke, both confirmed to me of this story. So this is not like a story in the books. This is firsthand. Maybe you could call it secondhand, because the children of these two people, confirmation of this incredible, wonderful story of kindness, of genuine kindness, of kindness without any recognition. Nobody knew about it. Apparently later on, perhaps the children were told, which is okay, because you children, it's okay. My father used to always tell me, it's okay to brag in front of your children, obviously in a healthy way, so that they learn from your good deeds. So I wanted to share this story in honor of my mother, in honor of these good people. May we, before Passover, if you know of anybody who is struggling to pay for the additional expenses of Passover, please let us know. We will make sure to help them. You could have them reach out to us. Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful Pesach. Thank you for listening. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to text. There's always a lot of questions associated with Passover. You're welcome to reach out. You're welcome to text. Please share these words of Torah, and thank you. Have a fantastic, wonderful holiday and a wonderful rest of your week.